They arrived as conquerors, yet learned to speak like custodians. The Mughal dynasty ruled with armies, but it lasted by persuading millions that rule could be orderly, even graceful. Their empire was built on a contradiction that never fully settled. The founders came from the hard edges of Central Asian politics, where a throne was taken, defended, and lost with equal speed. In India, they encountered a world older and denser, a landscape of walled cities, sacred sites, irrigated fields, and local loyalties that did not bend simply because a banner changed. The Mughals would claim mastery over that world, then spend generations proving again and again that their mastery was more than a moment of victory. The roots of the dynasty reach back to the legacy of Timur, whose campaigns left fear and prestige scattered across Central Asia and beyond. Timur's descendants inherited the shine of his name without the stability of a lasting state. In that unstable inheritance was Babur, born into expectations he could not secure. His youth became a pattern of brief triumphs and longer losses. Samarkand, the city that symbolized his lineage, slipped from his grasp repeatedly, taken by rivals who knew that reputation was useless without force. Each reversal forced Babur to adapt. Authority, he learned, could not rest on ancestry alone. It depended on discipline, alliances, and the ability to exploit opportunity before it closed. By the early 16th century, Babur looked south. Northern India was not a blank space waiting to be claimed, but it was politically divided. The Delhi Sultanate had weakened, and regional powers competed over the same river plains that fed one of the most productive agrarian zones on Earth. Babur's advantage was not numerical, it was tactical. He arrived with gunpowder weapons, field artillery, and battlefield techniques refined in the conflicts of Central Asia and Persia. At Panipat in 1526, his forces confronted a much larger army and shattered it. The victory was decisive, and it announced a shift in the logic of war. This was not simply a contest of courage and cavalry. It was an argument about technology, organization, and timing, and Babur had brought the future with him. Still, Babur's hold on India was uncertain. His own writings describe fascination and discomfort in equal measure. India was wealthy, but unfamiliar. The climate, customs, and rhythms of governance differed from the world he knew. The empire he carved out was real, yet it was not fully consolidated when he died in 1530. The problem he left behind was not merely how to conquer, but how to stay, how to root a foreign dynasty into a landscape that had seen dynasties come and go before. His son Humayun inherited that problem and struggled with it. Humayun was cultivated and curious, drawn to scholarship and courtly refinement, but he lacked steadiness at moments when steadiness mattered. Rivals understood that a new dynasty could be undone before it, hardened into habit. Within a decade, Humayun was driven out by Shah Suri, an Afghan leader whose brief rule demonstrated what effective administration could look like when it focused on roads, revenue, and discipline. Humayun's exile in Persia became the Mughal turning point. It was humiliating, but it was instructive. In Persia, he encountered a model of rule where authority was reinforced by ceremony, bureaucracy, and an imperial aesthetic that made power visible every day. When Humayun returned to India with Persian support, he brought more than soldiers. He brought ideas, court culture, and administrative practices that would shape Mughal governance for generations. His restoration was short, cut off by an accidental death, but the direction had changed. The dynasty would not rely on conquest alone. It would build an imperial system that could outlast the founder. That task fell to Akbar, who became emperor as a teenager in 1556. At first, his throne was protected by generals and regents, and threatened by rivals who assumed a child could be controlled. Instead, Akbar proved durable. He learned the geography of power by moving through it, campaigning, negotiating, and absorbing lessons about what India required of anyone who sought to rule it. Expansion mattered, but Akbar's deeper achievement was institutional. He turned conquest into administration, and administration into legitimacy. As Akbar expanded across northern and central India, he absorbed regions through a combination of force and incorporation. Defeated elites were often brought into imperial service rather than destroyed. Rajput rulers, in particular, were integrated through alliances and marriages, then tied to the imperial project through positions, honors, and obligations. This was not sentimental tolerance. It was strategy. Akbar recognized that an empire ruling over a vast non-Muslim population could not survive by treating difference as permanent suspicion. The state needed loyal intermediaries who knew the land, the people, and the local networks of authority. It needed stability that could be renewed each season, not merely claimed once on a battlefield. Akbar's government pursued that stability through revenue reform. Land was surveyed and categorized. Taxes were assessed in ways designed to be predictable, linking state income to agricultural production. Predictability mattered because the empire's power depended on regular extraction from an enormous rural base. A state that could not predict its revenue could not plan its armies, pay its officials, or sustain its capital. The Mughal fiscal system became an engine, converting harvest cycles into imperial capacity and turning the countryside into the foundation of courtly splendor. The Mughal court under Akbar also crafted an ideology meant to soften conquest into consent. Akbar hosted debates among scholars of different traditions, and his policies reduced legal distinctions that had marked religious difference as political difference. He abolished the jizya tax on non-Muslims, a move recorded by chroniclers as a sign of broad rule. It also carried practical value. It lowered resentment, weakened the rhetoric of resistance, and signaled that loyalty could be purchased through inclusion. The empire was not asking its subjects to share one faith. It was asking them to accept one sovereign. This political architecture was supported by the imperial service, a system that bound ambition to the emperor. Through ranks and appointments, nobles were assigned responsibilities, including the provision of troops, linking personal advancement to imperial needs. Many were granted jagirs, revenue assignments that supported their households and military obligations. The center retained the ability to reassign these revenue rights, limiting the growth of hereditary local power that could challenge the throne. It was a practical arrangement, and a risky one. It generated competition among elites, but it also ensured that elite fortunes depended on imperial favor rather than independent roots. By the time Akbar died in 1605, the Mughal Empire had become more than a conquest state. It was an organized system that could count, assess, reward, and punish across immense distances. It had also shaped a cultural language that made power feel elevated. The emperor was presented as the axis of order, a ruler whose authority was expressed through law, ceremony, and patronage, not only through war. Jahangir inherited this structure and ruled from 1605 to 1627. His reign is remembered for refined court culture, painting, and a cultivated emphasis on justice. Imperial records describe petitions and judgments as proof of moral authority, and court art often framed the emperor as a balancing presence, a figure above disorder. Yet beneath this cultivated surface, court politics intensified. Factions competed for access and influence. Family alliances mattered more. Personal favor could redirect policy. The state remained strong, but the stability of its systems began to depend more heavily on the temperament and health of the ruler, and on the shifting geometry of court power. Under Shah Jahan, who ruled from 1628 to 1658, Mughal authority reached its most recognizable and dazzling form. His reign coincided with extraordinary wealth, drawn from a vast agrarian base and a flourishing economy of craft production and trade. Shah Jahan invested that wealth in architecture that did not merely decorate the empire, but announced it. Forts, palaces, mosques, and gardens were built with deliberate symmetry meant to embody imperial control. Water ran through channels and fountains in patterns that suggested nature itself had been disciplined into obedience. Cities were planned to project order, with ceremonial spaces that turned governance into spectacle. The Taj Mahal, commissioned after the death of Mumtaz Mahal, became the dynasty's most enduring symbol. It is frequently described as a monument of devotion, but it also represents the logic of an empire at its height. A structure of such precision required a state capable of mobilizing artisans, materials, and labor across regions, sustaining the project through years of work and financing it through reliable extraction. The Taj Mahal therefore speaks not only to memorial and grief, but to administrative capacity and economic power. It exists because an empire could command time, skill, and wealth with concentrated authority. And yet, even at the height of splendor, pressure built beneath the surface. Monumental construction required revenue. Continuous campaigning required revenue. The imperial machine could provide it, but only if the relationship between center and province held steady. Officials needed to deliver assessments. Local intermediaries needed to cooperate. Nobles needed to accept rotation and reassignment without turning their grievances into rebellion. Each part of the system relied on the others, and the whole depended on the assumption that imperial authority would remain unquestioned. That assumption was tested violently in the succession crisis that brought Aurangzeb to power. In the late 1650s, Shah Jahan's sons fought for the throne, and the struggle revealed how high the stakes had become. The transfer of power was not merely a family conflict. It was a contest over the wealth of the empire, the appointment of its elites, and the direction of its ideology. Aurangzeb emerged as victor and ruled from 1658 to 1707, longer than any Mughal emperor, and his reign would reshape the empire's structure and memory. Aurangzeb expanded Mughal territory to its greatest extent, especially through prolonged campaigns in the Deccan. These wars were not brief conquests. They were decades of pressure, sieges, shifting alliances, and attrition across difficult terrain. They demanded constant mobilization, constant financing, and constant attention from the center. The empire grew larger, but governance became harder, and every additional mile of expansion increased the cost of holding what had already been taken. Aurangzeb's religious policies also shifted the empire's ideological balance. He reinstated the jizya and promoted a stricter interpretation of Islamic law within imperial governance. Records indicate that many non-Muslims continued to serve in the Mughal administration, and the empire did not transform into a simple religious state. But the tone changed. The flexibility that had once helped integrate diverse elites narrowed. Symbolic signals mattered in a multi-faith empire, and when symbols hardened, political relationships hardened with them. Resistance multiplied under the combined weight of fiscal demand, ideological rigidity, and military overstretch. In the Deccan, Maratha power expanded through mobility and local alliances, turning imperial campaigns into a landscape of persistent attrition. In the north, Sikh communities developed stronger military organization under pressure. Jat uprisings and other regional revolts reflected not only religious tension, but local grievances and the strain of revenue demands. Aurangzeb's armies could win battles, but victory did not always translate into stable incorporation. The empire's reach was immense, yet its grip began to loosen. When Aurangzeb died in 1707, he left behind a state larger than any his predecessors had ruled, but more fragile in cohesion. Succession disputes followed, and the court's authority weakened. Provincial governors and military commanders, once appointed and rotated to maintain dependence on the center, began to behave like independent rulers. Regions such as Bengal, Awadh, and Hyderabad developed strong administrations that still used Mughal symbols while pursuing their own interests. The imperial center struggled to enforce compliance because the mechanisms that had once bound elites to the throne relied on a steady flow of resources and the credibility of punishment. Both were weakening. The 18th century exposed the empire's fragility with a slow, relentless clarity. The Mansabdari and Jaigir arrangements depended on careful management of elite ambition and a revenue stream strong enough to sustain the expectations of the court and the army. When resources failed to meet demands, competition intensified. Court factions multiplied. Emperors were elevated and removed by competing groups that sought control of titles and access rather than stable governance. Authority became something negotiated inside the palace rather than enforced across the realm. External shocks made internal weakness visible. In 1739, Nadir Shah of Persia invaded and sacked Delhi, an event recorded in multiple accounts as a catastrophic humiliation for the Mughal court. The violence inflicted on the city and the seizure of immense treasure revealed what the empire could no longer prevent. The capital, once the heart of imperial confidence, had been exposed as vulnerable. After that, the empire's decline was no longer a private matter of court intrigue. It was a public fact, observed by regional rulers and foreign powers alike. And still, the Mughal dynasty did not vanish quickly. It lingered, increasingly ceremonial, because symbols can survive after institutions fail. Mughal legitimacy retained value. Coins, edicts, and titles invoked the emperor's name because the memory of centralized authority remained useful, even to those who no longer obeyed it. The empire had built an ideology strong enough to outlive the empire itself, at least for a time. What the Mughals left behind was not only architecture and art, though those are the most visible traces. They left administrative habits, revenue practices, and a model of courtly culture that shaped successor states. They left a Persianate language of governance that blended with local traditions, influencing literature, record-keeping, and political etiquette. They left cities whose markets and neighborhoods continued to pulse long after imperial command faded. They left an aesthetic of power that others would imitate, because it had once convinced millions that empire could be beautiful and orderly, even when it was demanding and coercive. The Taj Mahal endures because it was built at a moment when the empire could still command time. It stands as a mausoleum, but it also stands as evidence of an extraordinary concentration of resources and skill. Its calm symmetry can hide the deeper truth that made it possible. Such beauty was financed by a state that extracted wealth from an enormous population, managed elites through reward and rotation, and maintained order through a blend of persuasion and force. The marble appears weightless, but the system behind it was heavy, and it relied on constant balance. The Mughal story is not a simple rise followed by a sudden fall. It is a study in how a dynasty tried to convert conquest into legitimacy, then struggled to keep that legitimacy alive as the costs of empire accumulated. Under Akbar, accommodation and administration gave the empire resilience. Under Shah Jahan, Wealth and spectacle made power appear eternal. Under Aurangzeb, expansion and rigidity tested the system's limits until the strain became structural. The decline that followed was gradual, shaped by the same mechanisms that had once made the empire strong, because systems that bind can also break when pulled too hard. In the end, the dynasty that built the Taj Mahal and ruled tens of millions did not disappear into silence. It faded into memory, into ritual, into architecture that outlasted the armies that funded it. The contradiction remained even after the empire weakened. They came as outsiders, yet became the authors of a new imperial order. They ruled by force, yet sought to be remembered as builders. Their monuments still stand where politics failed, and their administrative habits still echo where authority vanished. The Mughal Empire could not make itself eternal, but it could shape what eternity would look like in stone, in garden water, and in the quiet persistence of a legacy that refuses to be reduced to conquest alone.